Hi, I'm Sydney, and this week I saw an early screening of Dr. Sleep. Warning, this whole video is totally spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, then you can go ahead and check out my spoiler-free review. Otherwise, let's just dive into it. So instead of trying to summarize the whole movie for you, I'm gonna go ahead and just touch on a few major points. For some context, I started reading Dr. Sleep, the 2013 Stephen King novel, but I only got about halfway through it. So while watching the film, I did have a lot of reference of the characters, but the ending was a completely new experience for me. Let's first acknowledge some of the character throwbacks. So Dr. Sleep recreates some of the original scenes from the 1980 Kubrick The Shining. These recreations are so freaking accurate. It's breathtaking and just completely mesmerizing. But there are two things that I couldn't help but cringe at a little bit. So the first being the casting of Shelley Duvall's Wendy, little Danny Torrance, Jack Torrance, as well as Dick Halloran. So this was an incredibly difficult task, I'm sure, for the filmmakers to cast these roles, but I actually think that they did it as close to perfect as they could. Alexandra Essoe, who plays Wendy, really took on that kind of breathy vocal affectation that Shelley Duvall did as Wendy.
Okay, I understand.
But even more so, Carl Lumley, who was Dick Halloran in Dr. Sleep, was very spot on to me, very much so with his voice as well.
She called it shiny.
Unfortunately, though, the casting for Jack Torrance was just a little bit off to me. Something about the way that he projected his voice and accented certain words I felt like could have been coached a little bit better.
You're breaking my concentration. You're distracting me.
But honestly, I'm not even tripping about that because those were really hard shoes to fill, and I think they actually did a job well done. If I am gonna be way over analytical though, one thing that really stood out to me at first when I was watching is that in Dr. Sleep, the little Danny Torrance boy has these sparkling blue eyes, but in the original Shining, Danny Torrance has these deep brown eyes that are like dark wells. And so I was like, that's weird that they would overlook that. But then you realize it's like, okay, well, Ewan McGregor is grown-up Danny Torrance, he has blue eyes, so they cast the kid with blue eyes so that it like makes sense and connects the characters. So it's all good, I understand that. That's just me being way over analytical. Another piece of fun casting was Carl Strucken as Grandpa Flick. He is just such an iconic character actor, from Twin Peaks to Lurch and the Addams Family to Witches of Eastwick, but more relevant, he starred in another Stephen King adaptation, which would be Gerald's Game, which is currently on Netflix, and it's super good. Another Dr. Sleep cast member also starred in Gerald's Game, which would be Bruce Greenwood, who plays Dr. John. I can't talk about casting without at least mentioning Jacob Tremblay, who played the baseball boy. He had such a small role, but he really nailed it, and it's one of the more disturbing scenes in the movie. So good job, Jacob. So now let's dive into a deep rabbit hole to discuss the other main thing that really irked me. So there is a scene where Ewan McGregor, Danny Torrance, meets with Bruce Greenwood, who plays Dr. John. Dr. John offers him a job to work as an orderly at a hospice facility. This scene takes place in an exact recreation of The Office, in which Jack Torrance has his job interview at the Overlook Hotel in the 1980 Stanley Kubrick film. Why is this? I have no freaking idea. There were many recreations of the Overlook Hotel in this film, but they were very intentionally supposed to be the location of the Overlook Hotel. This was just a random office in New Hampshire that happened to look exactly like the manager's office from the Overlook Hotel in 1980. I'm torn. I can't tell if it's supposed to be like a deep cut homage to the original film, or if there's something deeper taking place here that the filmmakers are trying to communicate to us. Because the only parallels that I see here is the fact that job interviews are taking place within that office in the different films. If you have any insight or theories about this, I would love to hear your thoughts. The other major choice from the filmmakers was the overall use of the Overlook Hotel. It is really hard to compare the Stephen King novel The Shining and Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Stephen King notoriously disapproved of Stanley Kubrick's version, calling it a Cadillac without an engine, and he also said that Jack Nicholson's portrayal of Jack Torrance had no character development essentially, because he starts off already kind of seeming crazy, so he just goes from crazy to more crazy, whereas in the book there's really a character arc and there's more empathy that the audience has towards him in his struggles, and there's just a greater character arc. The 1980 film ends with Dick Halloran getting axed to death, Wendy and Danny narrowly escaping on the snowmobile, and Jack Torrance freezing to death in the hedge maze. And don't even get me started on that picture at the end of the movie. You know the one. In the Stephen King novel The Shining, it ends with Dick Halloran rescuing Wendy and Danny. He lives, and Jack Torrance sacrifices himself essentially, fighting off the inner demons by overloading the boiler system and exploding the Overlook Hotel to smithereens. The hotel is gone, does not exist anymore. So I haven't finished reading Dr. Sleep yet, but in that universe, in the book, the hotel does not exist anymore. It burned down, it's gone. In this sense, the film Dr. Sleep is truly a sequel to the 1980 film The Shining, as opposed to just an adaptation of the book. The filmmakers made a really interesting choice by having the climax of the film take place at the Overlook Hotel. The Overlook has always seemed to hold a power over those who shine. Therefore, Danny believes it may be the one place that they can defeat Rose the Hat, because if the Overlook is a threat to Danny and Abra, then it's also a threat to Rose. This choice completely opens up the filmmakers' chance to satisfy those who love the Kubrick film, but I can't imagine the book ending this way, like at all, because the hotel's gone. But in a good way, it means that this film hasn't spoiled the book for me in any way, because I really don't know what's going to happen or how it's different. And also, in the way that Jack Torrance sacrificed himself in the Shining book, Danny Torrance in Dr. Sleep film sacrifices himself to blow up the Overlook Hotel in the same exact fashion. So what the heck? Why'd they do that? In a way, it is a nice way to tie in the concepts from the book in a more respectful way to Stephen King, considering he didn't like Kubrick's version too, and it also ties together the loose ends of wondering what happened to the hotel. My kind of issue with that though is it didn't feel totally necessary for Danny Torrance in the film for him to sacrifice himself, and he didn't really need to die. I feel like he could have just set off the boilers and then just been like bye and left, because he did have injuries, but the cops were like down the road and they could have helped and saved him. And I understand that he's also struggling with the inner demons from the Overlook at this point too, so in a way he was protecting Abra by staying away from her and staying behind, but it kind of didn't quite feel like enough of a motive to me for him to kill himself. Overall though, I think it was a great way to connect Danny back with the Overlook Hotel and to tie up loose ends, and it overall just left me feeling like, dang, Danny Torrance had a very sad life. This film to me felt like it was really about the transformation of Danny Torrance in discovering his own identity. At the beginning of the film, he's really leaning into the alcoholism that was passed down from his father, and he's just wanting to escape and hide from his past, but also from the shine that he has. By midway through the film, he's 8 years into sobriety, and we see him coming to terms with the relationship with his father, but also we see him humanizing his father a little bit more. He realizes his dad at one point was also seeking sobriety, so he feels really proud that he was able to conquer that, not only for himself, but in honor of his dad. It's actually a very beautiful and touching moment, and Danny's empathy for his father in this moment actually correlates a lot with the empathy that we feel for Jack Torrance within the Stephen King novel The Shining. Danny has also now assumed kind of the role that Dick Halloran had for him in the way that he is a mentor for Abra. By the end of the film, he does have a very powerful encounter with the ghost of his father, who has assumed the identity of Lloyd the bartender, and though Jack tempts him with alcohol, Danny is not his father. He holds his ground, he stays strong, and stays true to his own character. Danny goes through a huge character arc in this film, and being a fan of the original and as an audience member being tied to the trauma that he experienced as a kid, it is very moving to see him overcome that pain. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into a major rabbit hole about something I mentioned earlier. In Dr. Sleep, Jack Torrance's ghost appears as a bartender at the Overlook Hotel, and he introduces himself as Lloyd. In The Shining, Jack Torrance encounters a bartender named Lloyd. So maybe we can assume that Jack has taken the identity of Lloyd the bartender since he's been consumed by the hotel. Not quite. There's kind of a big plot hole here. So in the 1980 film The Shining, we are also introduced to a character named Delbert Grady. Grady is a waiter in the restaurant who spills a drink on Jack Torrance. Grady helps Jack clean himself up in the restroom, where we learn that Grady the waiter is actually Grady the caretaker who the previous winter chopped up his wife and 2 daughters at the hotel. Grady's ghost seems to have become one with the hotel as he's taken on the role of the waiter. When confronted about being the caretaker, at first he denies it, but then he informs Jack about Danny trying to contact Dick Halloran and instructs Jack to correct his family as he corrected his own family.
I corrected her.
So in a way, there is a sense of ownership of his identity. And although there is this sense of denial about his identity,
You were the caretaker here. I don't have any recollection of that at all.
he still claims the same name as he had when he was alive, which is
Grady, sir. Delbert Grady.
okay, so maybe we are guessing that Jack Torrance has been consumed by the hotel, as Grady was, and him being a bartender is very fitting because he was an alcoholic, right? But why would he take the name Lloyd? That part doesn't really make sense to me, and it is obvious that Danny is speaking with his father. He even calls him dad when they have the encounter in Dr. Sleep. And again, there is kind of this passive understanding that Jack knows he's talking to his son. So why would he introduce himself as Lloyd? I feel like maybe it was a messy attempt at trying to recreate the Grady scene from The Shining, like in a familiar setting, which would be the bar. Or there is some sort of deeper story within the character of Lloyd and how Jack's ghost has been integrated into the hotel. But I don't really know. Something didn't quite fit there for me. So let me know if you have any theories about this. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining left audiences with a lot of questions. Were the ghosts real? Was it just Jack being crazy? It also left a lot of room for conspiracy theories about the Apollo stuff and Dr. Sleep, on the other hand, is a very straightforward plotline. It doesn't leave a ton of room for questions and conspiracies like that. And it ends also feeling very concluded. But I think Dr. Sleep was a great combination of new characters, new plot lines, but also with a great mixture of nostalgia that felt appropriate and not forced. I really liked this movie, and I thought it was a really great way to honor Stephen King's novels as well as honor Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Dr. Sleep officially comes out on November 8th, and I highly recommend going to see it. Also, if you want, you can check out a video that I filmed with Travis where we discuss conspiracies surrounding The Shining, and there will be a link for that at the end. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you feel like it.